Back to convergence, everyone. I'm here as always with my co-host Faisal Hoque. Faisal, today's topic is one that you've been thinking about a lot lately. What happens when the AI strategy is solid, but the people running it aren't ready for it?
Yeah, exactly. Because what happens is that the data on this is honestly worse than most leaders think. There are recent survey that senior peak leaders, both in large US and UK professional services, that 61% said that they're abandoning at least one of AI project in the last year simply because people lack the skills to deliver it, right? So it's not a tool problem, it's a capability problem. It's organizational capability problem.
And it's not just one survey either. I believe Deloitte's 2026 State of AI and the Enterprise Report, they surveyed more than 3,200 business and IT leaders across 24 countries and found that insufficient worker skills is now the single biggest barrier to integrating AI into the business. So I would say that this is systemic.
That's why we call it a capability stack. It's basically 4 layers of the organizational capability that needs to come together to make AI strategy into a reality, right? And those 4 stacks are basically the technical depth, the domain application or domain expertise, the general workforce fluency, and the organizational infrastructure that holds it all together, right? So when you don't have either one of those things, it kind of falls apart and it's hard to execute.
So this plan is map, build, embed, which I think is what makes the difference from the usual upskill your people and even we hear sort of everywhere.
Right. This has been part of the 90-day plans that we have been developing. And this is the last of the 6-part series. And we call it the organizational capability. There's these 90-day plan around the map, build, and embed. It's really figuring out where the skill gaps are and how to bring it together.
So let's get into it. Before we actually get into the depths of the 90-day plan, Faisal, let's ground people in the stack itself. So there's 4 layers. And walk us through them again. What are those 4 layers?
So the 4 layers are basically starts with your, we call it the capability stack, right? So, and these capability stacks are, in 4 different areas. So technical domain is one of them, which is really basically all your engineering skills, right? If you don't have the engineering skills, meaning the large language model and machine language capabilities, understanding the data infrastructure. So that's technical capability. Second is the domain application, the layer where you take the strategy of the business and translate that with technological capabilities. It's application and system that manifest the ideas into operational reality. The general workforce fluency, meaning that everybody's aligned with what is the business requirements are and how it's going to create customer value and how that's going to generate the business growth or the bottom line efficiency. And that's basically an alignment from top to bottom, has the same understanding of where workforce is and how it happens. And the last layer is this organizational infrastructure of learning, right? Because things are changing so much and so many different ways. We looked at it from, the strategy to governance to architecture to cultural changes. It's a lot of learning. So you have to have the organizational infrastructure for learning and constant learning. So these 4 layers basically makes up that 90-day plan that we pull together.
So one thing that comes into my mind immediately is that these 4 layers, they make logical sense. The 4 layers, however, I think there's a differentiation, or maybe there's not, and that's something that'd be worth talking about. Is there a differentiation when we're talking about the actual size of the organization? Have you identified in your own experience that if we're talking about maybe the middle market, like medium-sized enterprises, that is there a sort of an identifiable representation of the structure? And there's probably not, because each organization is extremely unique. But again, we're talking about the AI era. We're talking about how organizations per se, both from the availability and a lack of concentration. Is there medium-sized organizations, larger organizations? Is there an identifiable division that you could say between these four layers?
Obviously, in the large enterprise, the complexity is more because you got too many layers, right? I can tell you from running my own medium-sized or small enterprise, you gotta have all those layers, right? Because you gotta have that technical capabilities. You have to understand the collective alignment of where the application is going to be applied and how that generates value. The learning also has to be multi-dimensional and multi-domain, which goes through from top to bottom, right? But what happened in a large enterprise is that the distribution of the knowledge and the alignment gap becomes more complex because, from the top to bottom, it always doesn't necessarily goes as fast as it should be, right? But if you put together this plan that we are talking about, it won't get you there, but it will at least get you started to apply this model regardless of the size and shape of the organization or industry or that a particular enterprise is performing its business.
But do you think that companies are then under pressure to overinvest in one of those layers? I mean, if I look at and analyze a certain movement within the market, I think that there's some companies that are maybe going too heavy on one layer and not necessarily as heavy as they should on another layer. You could probably say that there's a lot of emphasis and effort, technical budgets per se around AI, in particular cybersecurity, for obvious reasons, have increased and are increasing as we progress through the year. But maybe there's a misalignment, and I suppose that goes into the actual first 30 days of being able to map and take the first step in understanding what phase one would be if you are to implement the strategy itself. But just thinking, I just wonder, as companies overinvest, and what do they neglect? I mean, my own opinion would be education. A neglect of education on every single level.
Yeah.
All aspects of organization, regardless of business division.
In any kind of technological revolution or evolution, what happens is that we tend to focus a lot on the technical knowledge and technical skill set. So we end up hiring a lot of engineers. We try to train existing technical people on the latest and greatest technology, but we don't necessarily teach people on the complexity of the business structure and the business strategy and the organizational realities and cultural challenges and looking things from a holistic point of view that makes things happen or doesn't make it happen, right? So the tendency, or even on education, is mostly on technical side, not necessarily on the other element that we just talked about. So my experience is exactly like yours. Think about governance as an example, right? So, I mean, responsible AI and governance model is probably more important now than ever, right? But I don't think a lot of people are investing a lot of time to understand what that means. For example, there's a regulatory aspect of governance, but there's also standardization of governance. There are lots of standardization, like NIST and other things that exist, but I don't think too many people are familiar with that. So this is where that, to your point, that educational element becomes critical, right? Because you kind of have to have a balanced way of looking at that what we talk about, the workforce baselining and the learning, the infrastructure for learning, right? Those has to be holistic. It doesn't work without that holistic outlook.
So I think as though the first phase of mapping is a step that you understand what you have, what you need, and where the gap between both of them will hurt your business first. And that would start by defining the capability model, being specific about maybe what technical depth, the main application, and fluency actually means for your business. And then across sort of mapping matrix of assessing your existing workforce against the model. What advice would we give to leaders? Let's say that they map this, they assess their existing workforce, and they understood that on certain layers, maybe the sort of mapping of the domain application or even workforce fluency, that wasn't there.
What often is missed is that auditing, how learning currently works, right? So we're mapping or assessing the gaps of what's missing, but we're not necessarily assessing, whether the learning aspect is working or not. We've seen this over and over again, whereby you spend a lot of time teaching people on different models and how to apply that a model, but you're not getting out because people are not being creative or they're afraid of it, et cetera, et cetera. So this learning, how learning currently works is a critical gap that people often miss. I couldn't emphasize that aspect more. We need to look at whether the learning really works or not.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. One interesting thing with you, I actually saw it in practice this week. So I went to visit a client. It was a client that's in the pharma space. And the individual was talking about sort of high-level executive individual. He was talking about his interaction with an AI system, how he'd realized that it had the capabilities to help with sort of organogram, the chart mapping, that he was able to do it across his organization within a couple of hours. And the reason that he produced it himself is that the HR department had struggled with this particular task. Although they had access to the same tool. And you're actually mentioning in the plan as well, you mentioned audit and how learning currently works as part of this stage. And I think the main question here is, what's a red flag that an organization's learning infrastructure that's not working and it won't scale into the AI era, when also the first step is, understanding a lot of people have the same access to the same knowledge, but that learning, there's this disparate misalignment.
Absolutely. None of this works unless you apply this in your specific environment, your specific context, and your authentic offering that you're offering to your customer. So the learning is not just, okay, how do I make this tool work? Or how do I set this up? Or where do I host it? Who are the people who are designing, right? Those obviously are very important element because we talked about the technical element of it. But the real learning is how do we really apply it so that we can, create a unique value for our customer? So that comes from the institutional knowledge of the organization. When those institutional knowledge and the customer knowledge and changing behavior of the market combines with the technical knowledge, that's when the magic happens, right? So this is a bit of process, but this is also a bit of art, because when you talk about R&D or experimentation, which you and I talked about it ad nauseum in our previous episodes, that experimentation is looking at these elements. So when we're talking about the learning gap, you really have to look at the learning gap, but are we connecting the dot between the market knowledge and the institutional knowledge and the technical knowledge together to create that converged way of looking at things and applying it for the benefit of organizational growth and, the bottom line effect that we're looking for.
Yeah, so we're talking about as well, when we actually get to the build stage, we're talking about the fact that, middle managers are essentially accountable for a lot of it, if not all of it. If their teams aren't developing though, and none of these programs are actually working, what advice, again, here are we giving to middle managers to actually make a realistic way to hold them accountable for team capability without it just becoming, okay, my team's capable, they're doing this, thing there.
Look, there has been a lot of argument over the last couple of years that is the middle manager that's going to be the one that's going to get pushed out, because a lot of those things are going to get automated with AI, and the decision making would be much easier because of the agent will kind of take over it. It couldn't be the farthest thing from the truth. And a year ago, we wrote a piece, extensively talking about how the middle manager plays a role in pulling together the glues, because at the end of the day, middle management is the operational element that makes things happen, right? So in that context, the middle management has the pulse of the organization on the street or on the phone that knows how things get executed. So the middlemen are the ones should be held accountable to make these things happen from cross-domain learning and cross-domain execution. And by the way, they're the best position. They're in the best position to make it happen, right?
Yeah, of course they are.
Because they're the ear on the ground, right? So, and now people are talking about more and more that it's kind of how unrealistic it is to think that middle management is going to be pushed out because of agentic AI adoption, right? And I saw a piece yesterday or maybe yesterday on HBR talking about the same thing. But we've been arguing about this for the last couple of years that stop thinking about that, AI as a replacement for middle management. And actually, reality is that, you asked about the middle market organization versus large enterprise. This is particularly true in large enterprises because large enterprises are basically have lots of middle management because of the vast nature of the organization and the different market segment it does its businesses.
So that's been a really compact episode. Still have a lot of useful information, and the title is obviously your AI strategy is only as strong as the people who run it, and this is what we're talking about. People are the backbone of organizations. Technical transformation, technical trends, they're only ever as good as the people who are at the core of change, and that's how change happens. So what we are going to do is we're going to end this session, and I want to thank you, Faisal, for building this one out with me. There's links to the full piece, as always, and Faisal's other frameworks are in the show notes, wherever you're listening or watching with us. And we want to thank you, and we'll see you next time on Convergence. Thank you.